They mocked her for keeping the old war dog, but they never saw how he stayed awake when she cried at night, or how his body leaned toward hers like he knew her pain before she spoke. When the men came for him, she did not run, because love had already taught her how far she was willing to go, and there was no turning back now. Let me take you back to where it all began. My amazing friends and family, welcome back to Jenna's Velvet Tales. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe. Every subscription helps us share more emotional stories about the deep bonds between humans and animals. If this kind of story touches you, your support truly means a lot. Feel free to say where you're watching from, and don't forget to explore more beautiful stories here on the channel. Now back to the story. Eli Rourke came home from the war with tired hands and a heart that no longer knew where to rest. And the only thing she carried that still felt real was the weight of an old dog walking beside her. Finn did not look like a hero anymore, and neither did she, which is why people stared when they saw them together on the long road into town. He walked slow, and she matched him, even when her legs wanted to move faster, because she had learned overseas that leaving someone behind was a pain that never healed. The house she moved into was small and worn, but it was quiet enough for her thoughts, and Finn settled there as if he had been waiting his whole life to stop moving. At night, she talked to him like he was the only one who understood, and maybe he was, because he never asked her to explain the things she could not say out loud. People in town had opinions, and they did not keep them to themselves, but she had learned to let words pass through her without staying, because survival had already taken enough from her. One evening, while she was washing her hands at the sink, she noticed Finn was not behind her like always, and that small change made her chest tighten for reasons she could not name. She called his name once, then again, softer the second time, because fear had a way of lowering her voice. When she found him by the door, she knelt without thinking, and in that moment she felt something shift inside her. Not panic, not yet, but a deep knowing that whatever peace she thought she had found was about to be tested. She rested her forehead against his and whispered that she was there, because sometimes being present was the only promise left to give, and somewhere far from that house, someone who should not have remembered them had already begun to do exactly that. She stayed beside him for a long time. Her knees ached, but she didn't move. Finn's body was warm, but not like before. His breathing was thin, almost like he didn't want her to hear it. She kept her hand on his back and counted the rise and fall. 1 pause, 2 longer pause. The dog who had once pulled a man out of a burning jeep was now struggling to lift his head off the floor. She wasn't ready to lose him, but it was more than that. She was scared that if he went, no one would be left who truly knew what she had survived. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and whispered, "You're all right. I've got you." Finn moved his paw, just a little, like he was trying to answer. That broke something inside her, but she held it together, at least on the outside. She had learned how to do that long ago. As a medic, she had to be the one who stayed calm, who said things like, "You're going to be okay," even when she knew it wasn't true. She stayed beside him until the light through the window began to shift. It painted lines on the floor that stretched slowly across the room. She stood up carefully and filled a bowl with water, warm, not cold. Finn didn't drink much, but he licked once or twice, and that gave her hope. She didn't need him to run. She just needed him to stay. By the time the sun was high, she had called the vet. The only one she trusted was 2 towns over. A quiet man named Russell who didn't ask too many questions. He said he could come by at 5. Eli hung up the phone and sat on the front steps. She needed air, but she didn't want to be far from Finn. She watched the road, the trees, the place where the forest met the curve of the driveway. Her eyes caught on something in the snow, something small and sharp. It was a boot print. Not hers, not Russell's. Too fresh to be old. Too deep to be left by a stranger walking by. She felt her breath change without meaning to. She stood up, slow, not wanting to disturb anything, but needing to know. She followed the prints across the front yard, toward the side of the house. Then they vanished at the edge of the shed. The snow had been disturbed, but not in a messy way. Like someone had stood there, just stood. She looked up at the window. It was the same one where she used to keep the girls drawing. Her stomach dropped. She walked fast back into the house. She didn't run. Running made you feel more afraid than you already were. When she got to the kitchen, she stared at the fridge. The magnets were still there, the little grocery list, the old calendar. But the paper, the girl's drawing, it was gone. She stood there frozen. She hadn't moved it. She hadn't touched that thing in over a year. The day the girl gave it to her, she had folded it into her pocket with shaking fingers and taped it up the same night. It had stayed there through every season, through storms, through silence, until now. She didn't speak, didn't yell, just turned and walked back to Finn, who had managed to raise his head a little. He looked at her, and something in his face told her he knew. He always knew before she did. His body might have been slower now, but his mind was still sharp, still watchful. She sat down beside him again. "They were here," she said softly. Finn made a sound, a deep breath that almost felt like a sigh. She looked at him. "We didn't talk about her, not for a long time. Maybe we should have." There was a knock at the door. She didn't jump. She just looked down at Finn. He didn't growl, didn't move. His eyes stayed open but calm. That told her it wasn't the wrong kind of knock. She stood up and opened the door. Russell stood there, holding his old canvas bag. "Vet's here," he said. She stepped aside and let him in. He knelt beside Finn, looked him over gently, touching the leg, the side, listening with his stethoscope. "Heart's weak," he said, "but it's still there. Might be pain in his chest. Hard to say with dogs like him. He won't show it." Eli nodded. "What do I do?" "Keep him warm. Keep him close. If he wants to eat, let him. If not, don't push it. Don't leave him alone." "I wasn't going to," she said. Russell paused. "Did he serve with you?" She nodded again. "I thought so," he said quietly. "The way he looks at you, that's a bond. I don't see that much." She wanted to ask if Russell had noticed the footprints, but she didn't. Something about the way the light was falling outside made her feel like it wasn't time to say it yet. She thanked him, and he left without saying anything more. After he was gone, she went back to the front door and locked it. Then she walked through every room of the house, one by one. She didn't rush. She opened closets. She checked windows. Nothing was broken, nothing missing, except that one drawing. She sat down on the couch and leaned her head back. Then, out loud to no one, she said, "They know where we are." Finn lifted his head slightly, and just like that, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like the waiting room before something happened. Something you couldn't undo. She didn't turn on the TV that night. She didn't open a book. She didn't light a fire. The house stayed quiet, not because she needed it that way, but because any sound now felt like it would echo too far. Instead, she sat with her legs tucked under her on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, and Finn's head resting gently on her foot. His breathing was steadier now, still shallow but not as strained as earlier. She held the silence like a warm cup, hands wrapped around it, not sipping from it, just holding. Every so often, she looked at the fridge again, not to see if the drawing had returned. She knew it wouldn't, but to make sure the space where it had lived was still there. Still empty, still real. It had been drawn with cheap crayons on paper too thin for the snow that had stuck to it that day. She remembered holding it while the girl clung to Finn's neck. The child had been covered in ash and dust, hair matted, eyes wide. She hadn't said a word, just kept both hands buried in the dog's fur. Eli had kept the picture not because it was beautiful, but because it was proof that something good had made it out. And now it was gone. Her phone buzzed once on the table. She didn't look at it right away. She didn't want it to be another reminder of something else slipping away. But after a few minutes, she leaned over and picked it up. One new text. No name, just a number she didn't know. "Does he still sleep at the foot of your bed?" Her stomach turned. She stood quickly and locked the front door again, even though it was already locked. She checked the back door, the windows, the basement. Every room felt smaller than it had the day before. Back in the living room, she picked up the phone again and typed a reply. "Who is this?" No answer came. She waited, holding the phone in one hand and Finn's collar in the other. After 10 minutes, she set it down. That night, she didn't go to bed. She made a space for herself on the floor beside Finn, her back against the couch, his body warm beside hers. She watched the shadows move across the ceiling. Every creak in the walls made her eyes flick toward the windows. She wanted to close the curtains but also wanted to see what was out there, if anything came again. Around 2 in the morning, Finn lifted his head and let out a breath that sounded different from the others. He was alert. She followed his gaze. There was a shape on the porch. Not a person. Not fully. It looked like someone had left something. Not walked up. Not knocked. Just left it. Eli stood slowly, careful not to make noise. She didn't turn on the porch light. She opened the door halfway, held her breath, and looked down. There was a shoebox. No writing on it. No tape. Just an old brown box sitting there like it had always been part of the house. She didn't touch it right away. She bent down, looked closely. No wires. No smell. Just dust, snow, and time. She brought it inside. Finn didn't move. He stared at it. She opened it slowly. Inside, there were photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white. Color. Some faded. Some new. But they all had one thing in common. They were of children. Not smiling. Not posing. Just watching. Looking at the camera with eyes too old for their faces. In the middle of the stack was a smaller envelope. Inside it, one photo. The girl. The same girl from the drawing. Same hair. Same face. But older. Maybe a year or two older. Still holding Finn. But this time he looked worse. Thinner. More tired. Eli stared at it for a long time. Then she turned it over. On the back it read, "She remembers. Do you?" Her knees buckled again. This time she didn't stop them. She sat right there on the floor with the photo in her hands. Finn let out a sound that wasn't quite a whimper. She looked at him, tears building. "What is happening?" she whispered. Finn blinked once. And for the first time in years, she felt like he wanted to speak. She stayed on the floor longer than she meant to. Her legs had gone numb, but she didn't care. The photograph in her hand had stopped being just paper. Felt heavier than that. It felt like the weight of everything she had been trying not to feel since she came home. Finn's head rested against her thigh again, and though he hadn't made a sound, his breath had shifted. She could feel it, like a quiet drumbeat under her hand. She turned the photo back over, looked at the girl's face again. It wasn't just memory now. It was warning. Something had happened. Something was still happening. She stood slowly and took the photo to the kitchen. She opened the drawer where she kept her letters, the ones she never sent. She slid the picture in between them, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. Then she closed the drawer and placed both hands flat on the counter. It had been months since she'd spoken to anyone who knew what she used to do, what she had seen, what she had covered up. Not because she wanted to, but because silence was the only thing the world left for people like her. And now silence was all she had left to lose. The next morning, the snow had stopped. The sky was gray, but quiet. Eli stood on the porch with a mug of warm water for Finn. He couldn't hold himself up to drink it, so she knelt and held the bowl close to his mouth. He took a few small laps and then rested his chin on her wrist. She didn't pull away. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. No name. Just another question. Was she worth saving? Eli stared at the screen. Her fingers shook. She thought about the building. About the dust. About the way the child had not screamed. Not even once. While the world burned around her. She thought about how Finn had refused to leave her side. She replied, "Yes." The reply came back instantly. "Then you already understand why this can't stay buried." She turned off the phone. Later that day, she drove into town. Not to run. Just to see. Just to make sure she was still allowed to walk free. The people at the store didn't say much. They nodded. Some smiled. Some didn't look at her at all. That was fine. She bought bread. Soup. A new box of dog biscuits she knew Finn might not eat, but she wanted them in the house anyway, just in case. As she was walking to her truck, she heard someone call her name. It had been a long time since anyone did. She turned. It was Mrs. Mabel from next door. The one who grew lavender and didn't knock. She was holding a small tin box. "This was in my mailbox," she said. "But it has your name on it." Eli took it. No writing on the outside. "Did you see who left it?" Mabel shook her head. "No. But it was there this morning." Eli thanked her, got in her truck, closed the door. She sat for a moment before opening the tin. Inside was another photo. Not of a person this time. A Finn. But this photo wasn't old. It wasn't from the war. It was from 2 days ago. Taken through her window. Finn lying beside the couch. Eli sitting on the floor, eyes closed, hand on his chest. Someone had been watching them. She held the tin tight, so tight her knuckles turned white. She drove home without music. Without thinking. Just breathing. When she reached the house, Finn was still by the door. He wagged his tail once, slow, but there. She knelt beside him and whispered, "We're not alone." His ears twitched. She placed the photo on the table where she could see it. And then, finally, she did something she hadn't done in years. She picked up the phone and called her old captain. It rang 5 times before he answered. "Eli?" he said. "It's time," she said softly. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "I'll be there in 2 days." She hung up. Then she sat with Finn again, placed her hand on his fur and waited. That night, the sound of tires crunching on snow woke her before the porch light did. But when she looked out the window, there was no car, only footprints, leading to the front door, then stopping. She didn't open the door right away. She stood still, barefoot on the cold floor, her hand resting on the curtain edge. The porch was empty. There was no movement, no car, no voice, but the footprints were real, deep enough to know someone had stood there a while, facing the door, watching it, and then just leaving. She counted the steps with her eyes. 11. Then they vanished into the snow. Eli slowly moved back from the window. She didn't wake Finn. His body needed rest more than worry. But she reached for the firewood basket near the wall and slid it across the floor, blocking the door. It wasn't a lock. It wasn't even protection. But it gave her a second. Sometimes a second was everything. She sat back on the couch, staring at the door. Sleep didn't come. It hadn't for weeks. But that night, her eyes stayed open longer than usual. By morning, the snow had covered the prints again, like they were never there. She made Finn a small bowl of chicken broth. He sniffed it, looked up at her, then slowly began to eat. Not much, just a few careful laps. But enough. She smiled, her eyes stinging, and whispered, "Good boy." At noon, the phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. She pressed the button and held it to her ear. Didn't speak. A man's voice, low and slow, came through. Not threatening, not warm, just calm. "I know you think you're alone. You're not." Silence. "Did you get the photos?" She didn't answer. He continued, "We don't want him. We want what he remembers." She finally spoke. "He's dying." The voice paused. "Then you don't have much time either." She hung up. No name, no number saved. She walked back to the living room, where Finn had lifted his head just enough to meet her eyes. She sat beside him, hand on his side, the same place he'd been wounded years ago. "We don't have much time," she said quietly. That night, as she sat by the window, she pulled open the drawer where she kept her old notebooks. She flipped through the pages, training logs, supply lists, wound care protocols, and found the page she had once torn out and hidden. It was a name, place, a date, the last mission, the one where everything changed. She had never spoken about it, not to anyone, but now someone else had, and that meant it wasn't a secret anymore. She folded the paper in half and slid it into her coat pocket. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew she couldn't stay. Not now. Not when they were circling like ghosts. Not when Finn was still breathing. The next morning, she packed a small bag. Just the essentials. Some medical supplies. A photo of the girl. Dog food. Water. She gently lifted Finn into the back seat of the truck, laying him on a blanket. He didn't resist. His eyes stayed on her the whole time. She took one last look at the house, at the snow-covered roof, the empty porch. She didn't leave a note. There was no one to read it. She pulled onto the road and headed west, toward the place they told her never to speak of again, toward the truth they buried, toward whoever had dared to ask the question, does he still remember the girl? The road was silent except for the steady hum of the truck's old tires. Eli kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near Finn's back, not touching him, just close enough for him to feel she was still there. Snow flurries drifted across the windshield, but she didn't turn on the wipers right away. The quiet rhythm of the flakes felt easier than the thoughts moving through her mind. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't need to hear anything else right now. The road curved gently through the trees, heading west, deeper into a part of the country she hadn't driven in years. Each mile felt like peeling back a page from a chapter she had tried to leave unread. Finn shifted slightly on the blanket, letting out a soft breath. He wasn't in pain, at least not the kind you could see. But Eli could tell he was running low. His strength came in waves now. Some moments strong, some moments gone. She pulled into a rest stop near the edge of a frozen lake. Just a picnic table, an old bench, and a vending machine that hadn't worked since 2012. She parked, stepped out, and opened the passenger door. Finn didn't try to move. She crouched beside him and whispered, "Let's stretch for a minute." It took time, but she gently lifted him out, holding him close against her chest, the way she used to carry injured soldiers off the field. She set him down near the bench. He stood, wobbled, found his footing. Together they walked 5 slow steps. That was all he could do. She sat on the bench. He sat beside her. Their shoulders touched. Eli looked out at the frozen water and said, "You remember when we first met?" Finn blinked. "You were wild. Not violent, just untrusting, like every sound was a threat." She smiled a little. "I understood that." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper, the name, the place, the date. She looked at it again. 3 Pines, she whispered. That was the town, if you could call it that. Not on most maps, not on GPS. It was the kind of place you had to hear about from someone who wasn't supposed to talk. But that's where the last photo had been taken. That's where the girl had been found. That's where Finn had stood in front of a building with smoke rising behind him and barked until someone came. Only now it wasn't smoke. It was memory, and it was catching up. They reached 3 Pines just after dark. No sign, no welcome, just a road that narrowed and houses that looked like they didn't want visitors. She drove slowly through what could have been the center of town. 2 closed stores, a diner with a light still on, and a boarded-up building with broken windows. She pulled into the side of an old church and parked in the shadow of a broken steeple. She let the engine idle. Then she turned it off. She reached over, touched Finn's ear gently. "We're here." She stepped out, opened his door. But this time he didn't move. She leaned in, placed her arms under him and lifted. Lighter than he should be. He didn't resist. He just looked at her, calm. Inside the church, the air smelled like wood and old stories. No people, just dust. She laid Finn down near the front pew, lit a small oil lamp she found tucked in the corner. The light flickered just enough to see. She sat beside him and pulled the photo from her bag, the one of the girl. "I think she came back here," she said softly. "Or someone brought her." Finn's eyes didn't close. They stayed fixed on her. She pulled out the old field report, the one that never made it into any official file. Coordinates, building codes, civilian names. One name circled. Lara Mendez, the girl. She was supposed to be sent to a refugee shelter. Eli never found out where. The commander had said they'd take care of it. But that same commander had disappeared 3 months later, no warning, no report. Gone. And now someone had sent Eli a photo of that same girl. Older. With Finn. Alive. Footsteps. Real ones. Slow. Cautious. Outside the church. Eli didn't move right away. She listened. A hand touched the door. Creaked open. Just an inch. A voice. Small. Young. "Hello." She stood up slowly, stepped toward the door. A girl stood there. Brown jacket. Too big for her. Snow in her hair. She looked up, eyes wide, but not afraid. Eli stared. It wasn't the girl from the photo, but she looked like her. The girl held out a piece of paper. "He said you'd come," she whispered. Eli took it, opened it. Inside, another photo. Finn. With a man. The man's face was scratched out, but the girl in the photo was smiling. Same girl, just younger. She looked at the child in front of her. "Who gave this to you?" The girl pointed to the trees. "He didn't tell me his name, but he said to give this to the woman with the dog who walks slow." Eli knelt down, her heart thudding. "What did he look like?" The girl thought. "Tired." Eli nodded. "Me too." Back inside, she sat beside Finn again, holding the photo. His eyes found hers. "I think we just stepped into something we weren't supposed to find," she said. Finn rested his head on her foot. She didn't need more than that. She didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, because she understood. The photo, the girl, the voice on the phone, the silence that had followed her home. Someone wasn't warning her. They were reminding her. Finn lay beside her on the floor of that cold, forgotten church, wrapped in the same army blanket she'd carried across 3 countries. His breathing was light, but steady, his one eye still watching. She took the last photo they'd given her, the one with the scratched-out face, and turned it over. There was something new this time, a short sentence written in the bottom corner. "You kept the dog. But what else did you bring back?" She swallowed hard. The girl from the porch had said he didn't tell her his name, but Eli was sure now. She had seen that face before. The eyes. The way he stood in the background of an old unit photo she had tucked away in a box. His name was Owen Roth. He had been part of the same operation, same mission, same aftermath. He had disappeared after the girl was rescued. Not listed as dead. Not reassigned. Just vanished. Now he was leaving photos. Now he was using children to deliver messages. Which meant he still cared. Or maybe he still blamed her. The next morning, she made Finn warm broth and a small piece of boiled egg. He ate a little, licked her hand. His energy was low but present. She opened the church door to sunlight and saw something that stopped her heart. At the edge of the clearing, in the line where trees touched road, someone had drawn a cross in the snow. Not with a stick, with footsteps. A careful walk in a straight line. Then a cross. Not for God. Not for mourning. It was a message. Finn stepped beside her. Slowly. One leg dragging. He looked at the cross. Then back at her. And for the first time in weeks he made a sound. A deep, tired breath. Like a warning. Like a memory. She packed up what little they had brought. Left nothing behind but the shape of them in the dust. She drove deeper into 3 Pines. Past the edge of what used to be the market. Past the gas station with no sign. Until she reached the building. She knew it before she stepped out. The paint was peeling. The windows boarded. But it was the same. The place where the child had been found. Where Finn had barked once. Sharp and clean. Above all the screaming. Where Eli had pulled her from the rubble. She stepped out of the truck. Opened the door. Finn didn't wait to be lifted. He climbed out. Took effort. It hurt. But he walked on his own. To the door of the building. And sat. Waiting. Eli followed. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just sat beside him. In silence. Until a voice behind her said, "You really came." She stood quickly. Finn did not move. Owen Roth stepped out from the trees. Older. Slower. But not broken. Not yet. "I told them you wouldn't let it go," he said. Eli kept her eyes on him. "You used a child." "I had to. You wouldn't have come if I reached out directly." She didn't argue. He was right. "Why now?" she asked. "Because they're cleaning up loose ends. And I thought maybe, just maybe, you still cared." Eli looked down at Finn. Then back at Owen. "I never stopped." He stepped closer. "They're going after the girl next." That was all she needed to hear. Her voice didn't shake. "Where is she?" He handed her a piece of paper, an address, a name. She folded it and slid it into her coat. Then she knelt beside Finn. His body leaned into hers. She whispered, "We're not done yet." And that was how it started. They mocked her for keeping the old war dog, said he was too broken, too slow, too dangerous. But they didn't know. He was the only reason the truth still had a heartbeat. And when they came for him, they found her instead. They left 3 Pines before the sun had fully risen. Owen had given her an address, a town name, a quiet warning. Then he walked back into the trees and didn't say goodbye. Eli didn't ask him to stay. Some people live with their ghosts. Others walk beside them. She drove west again. This time with purpose. This time with a destination that wasn't just running from something, it was running toward someone. Finn lay curled on the seat beside her, his body still, his eyes open. He wasn't sleeping. Not fully. But he was tired in a way she couldn't fix with rest or medicine. She kept one hand near him as she drove. He didn't move much, but every so often his paw would slide gently until it touched her arm. It was enough. The girl's name was Lara, the child from the mission, the one Finn had pulled from the rubble with his own teeth, gripping her jacket, dragging her out before anyone else heard her crying. Eli hadn't seen her since that day. She remembered the way Lara had looked up at her when it was over, not saying thank you, not hugging, not crying, just locking eyes, like she had memorized Eli's face for later. The address was in a town called Haven Creek. Population under 300. 1 post office. 1 church. No clinic. The kind of place where nothing big ever happened. The kind of place where secrets went to rest. She reached Haven Creek just before dark. A grocery store the size of a living room sat at the center of town. 2 kids rode bikes past her truck as she parked in front of a small house with a blue door and 1 dying plant on the porch. She checked the paper. The address matched. She turned off the engine. Finn didn't move. She leaned down, kissed the side of his head. "I'll be quick." He didn't lift his head, but his tail tapped once against the seat. She stepped onto the porch and knocked. Nothing. She waited. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then, just as she turned to leave, the door opened. Slow, like someone wasn't sure whether to finish. A woman stood there. Not a girl anymore. But her eyes. Eli knew those eyes. The woman stared at her for a moment. Her voice was soft. "You're the medic." Eli nodded. "And you're the girl." They both stood there, quiet. Then the woman opened the door wider. "You'd better come in." The inside of the house was small, clean, but not lived in. No pictures on the wall. No shoes near the door. Just 1 couch, 1 lamp, and a folded blanket sitting in the corner like it didn't belong. Lara sat on the armrest, her hands folded. "You kept him?" she asked. Eli nodded. "He's in the truck." A long pause. Then, "Is he okay?" "He's old," Eli said. "Tired. But he remembers." Lara looked down. "I sent the first photo," she said. Eli didn't speak. "I didn't mean to scare you. I needed you to know someone was watching." "Watching who?" Lara looked up. Her voice was smaller now. "Me." Outside. Finn lifted his head. His nose twitched. His eyes narrowed. He let out a low breath through his nose, then stared out the truck window. Inside, Lara stood and walked to the drawer beside the couch. She opened it, pulled out a box. Inside, more photos. Not of her. Not of Eli. Men in uniforms. Women in hospital tents. Children behind fences. "They said they were helping," she whispered. "But we both know what it really was." Eli sat down. Her voice was steady. "You saw something you weren't supposed to." Lara nodded. "They said you'd forget. That trauma makes you forget. But I never did. Not his face. Not the way the commander looked at me when he thought I couldn't understand English." She pulled out 1 photo and handed it to Eli. It was him. Commander Breck. The one who ordered them to move on that day. The one who told Eli to stop digging. The one Finn growled at every time he passed. Eli's fingers tightened around the photo. "He's still looking for you?" Lara nodded. "And now he knows I kept the dog." A sound outside. Not loud, just present. Eli stood, crossed to the window. Two figures. Far back. Near the edge of the tree line. No movement. Just standing. Watching. She moved away from the glass. "You have somewhere else you can go?" she asked. Lara shook her head. Eli looked at her. "Then come with me." Lara didn't answer at first. Then quietly, "Will he remember me?" Eli didn't smile, but her voice softened. "He already does." They left that night. Lara sat in the back seat, eyes on Finn. He lifted his head, looked at her. She reached forward, her fingers just brushing his ear. He didn't move away. Eli drove without speaking. But in her chest, something had shifted. This wasn't just about the dog anymore. It wasn't even just about the girl. It was about the truth. The kind they tried to bury. The kind that had teeth. Just after midnight, they pulled into a motel 3 hours west. Small, quiet, a light on in the office. Eli paid cash. 2 beds. 1 night. Inside, Lara lay down almost immediately. Eli sat on the floor beside Finn, who was curled into himself, legs stiff, breathing slow. She rested her hand on his side. He opened his eye. She whispered, "We found her." And for the first time in days, Finn wagged his tail. That night Eli didn't sleep, not out of fear, but because tomorrow they would start writing the part of the story no one wanted told. And whoever came for them next would have to go through all 3. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the motel room felt awake. Not in the way that meant noise or movement, but in the way a space holds breath before something is said. Lara sat on the edge of the bed, both feet on the floor, staring at her hands. Eli was by the window, holding a lukewarm cup of motel coffee, watching the parking lot. Finn was on the floor between them, not asleep, just there. Lara broke the silence. "How do you carry it?" Eli turned, eyebrows pulling slightly. Lara didn't look up. The guilt, the knowing, the things they did. Eli didn't answer right away. She took a sip from the cup, then set it down on the window ledge. "I don't carry it," she said softly. "Not all of it. Some of it carries me." Lara looked at her. "That doesn't sound easier." "It isn't." Finn lifted his head slowly, eye blinking once as if joining the conversation. Eli crouched beside him. "We're going to find out what they're hiding," she said gently. "And if you're ready, we're going to make it known." Finn didn't move, but the way his body leaned into her hand said more than words. The drive took them north. Eli didn't explain where they were going at first, but Lara didn't ask. She trusted her, and that kind of trust wasn't given lightly, especially not after what she'd been through. They stopped at a gas station with no other cars. Lara went inside to use the bathroom. Eli filled the tank and leaned against the truck. The cold air bit at her skin, but her thoughts were louder. She remembered the last thing Roth said before he walked away. "You kept the dog, but you buried the rest." And she had. She had tried to leave the mission behind. But now it was showing up in motel rooms and mailboxes and photographs that didn't belong in this time. Lara came back with a candy bar and 2 bottles of water. She handed one to Eli and nodded toward the road. "Where are we heading?" Eli opened the map she had marked the night before. She pointed to a small town upstate, not well known, but it had a name she remembered from the original field report. Marrow Field. Back then it was listed as a staging area. Civilian evac. Temporary triage. But that wasn't what it had been. It was a cover. A warehouse full of locked rooms and paperwork that disappeared after the mission ended. The girl had been taken there. So had Finn. So had half the unit. Now Eli was going back. They arrived by late afternoon. Marrow Field was quieter than she remembered. The buildings were still there. Empty, worn down, cracked windows, faded letters on the doors. She parked the truck behind a rusted fence and turned off the engine. Lara looked around. "You think they left anything?" Eli nodded. "People leave pieces, even when they think they didn't." She helped Finn out of the truck, carrying him slowly, then setting him on the grass. He stood with effort, sniffed the air, and turned his head toward the far building. Eli followed his gaze. "That's the one," she said. Lara walked beside her. As they reached the door, Finn stopped. He stood very still, then stepped forward. Eli pushed open the door. Inside, dust floated through a broken beam of light. The building smelled like mold and old sweat. She remembered it too well. The walls still held the scratches from people who had passed through. Desperate, hurt, forgotten. Room after room, empty beds, old charts, a box of unused 4 lines still sealed in plastic. Then they found the room. It had no number, just a heavy metal door, slightly open. Eli paused, then pushed it fully open. Inside, a chair, a table, and a metal crate, the kind used for military K9s. She stepped in slowly. Lara stood behind her, silent. Finn sniffed once, then again. Then he walked into the room and sat down in front of the crate. Not like a dog, like a witness. Eli's throat tightened. She crouched next to the crate and saw the number stamped on the side. 74 Med F. Her old supply number. She opened the crate. Inside, a folder, wrapped in plastic, shoved in the back. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The papers inside were copies of reports, handwritten notes, photos. One labeled, "Unfit for service, retirement order denied." It was Finn's. The report was marked classified, but someone had kept it anyway. At the bottom, a red ink line. The animal remembers. Handler shows signs of refusal to comply. Recommendation: separate and isolate. Eli stood up slowly. They hadn't just tried to retire Finn. They tried to silence him. And her. Lara looked over her shoulder, reading the page. They knew what he saw. Eli nodded. And they were afraid he'd show it. That night, they stayed in a small motel off the highway. Lara sat by the window, Eli on the floor beside Finn. She pulled out the old photo again, the one with the girl. The building, the faint shadow of Breck in the background. Then she laid it next to the new report. It matched. Everything lined up. They had proof. But now, they had to decide what to do with it. Eli looked at Lara. "You still want to speak?" Lara didn't hesitate. "I was waiting for you." They slept in silence. Finn curled between them. And for the first time in years, Eli didn't feel like she was carrying something alone. She was holding it with someone. And soon the world would hear it too. They left the motel early. No breakfast. No talking. Just motion. Eli had slept with the report under her pillow, like a child hiding something precious. Finn had curled beside her legs, twitching now and then in his sleep, not from pain, but from something deeper. Memory. Lara was already dressed when Eli opened her eyes. Sitting by the window again, watching the road. "There's a man across the street," Lara said. "Same one I saw in Haven Creek." Eli joined her, careful not to move the curtains too much. A black coat, a gray hat, just standing beside a payphone that didn't work anymore. Not looking directly at them, but he was there. "You think he's military?" Lara asked. Eli shook her head. "Private, probably hired by whoever Breck still works with. They're watching us, but not ready to move." Lara turned. "Why not?" "Because they're afraid of what we have." By noon, they were back on the road. Destination: Fort Russell, the last base Breck had officially reported to before disappearing off government records. Eli didn't want to go there, but she had no choice. The records they found in Merrow Field said he had pulled files from the dog unit registry 5 years after the mission. Finn's name was circled. So was Eli's. This wasn't a coincidence. Eli turned to Lara. "If he's there, we confront him. If not, we leave the file with someone who still cares." Lara nodded. "Who would that be?" Eli didn't answer. They stopped once. A wide-open rest area, empty picnic tables, one vending machine humming quietly. Eli let Finn out of the truck. He stood slowly, walked a few feet, and stopped. He looked toward a tree, then back at her. She followed his gaze. Carved in the bark, barely visible, were the letters MR. She touched them gently. "Meredith Roth," she whispered. His sister. Roth had told her once that his sister used to carve her name into trees behind their house as a child. It was her way of saying, I was here. This wasn't random. This was a message. He was still helping them from a distance. Fort Russell didn't look like much anymore. A decommissioned training base now half abandoned, half leased to private contractors. The kind of place where no one asked questions as long as the gate stayed locked. Eli pulled up and stopped just outside the range of the cameras. She turned to Lara. Stay with Finn. If I don't come back in 20 minutes, you leave. Lara didn't argue. Eli stepped out, papers tucked into her jacket. She walked with purpose, past the fence, through the gate, straight toward the only building with lights on. A man in a gray vest opened the door. You lost? He asked. No, she said calmly. I'm looking for Commander Breck. The man stiffened. You a reporter? Worse, Eli said. I'm the reason he's about to be exposed. She pulled out the file and handed it to him. He opened it, skimmed the first few pages, and his face changed. You're Rourke, he said. Eli didn't blink. Tell him I remember everything. So does the dog. And the girl? She's not a ghost anymore. She turned and walked back to the truck. No one followed. Not yet. That night, in a small cabin outside the city, Lara spread the photos across the table. All of them. The ones from the crate, from the motel, from her own memory. Eli stood over them. You think it's enough? Lara asked. Eli looked down at Finn, who was resting with his head on a folded towel. She whispered, It has to be. Lara sat at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand. It was time. She pressed record. She spoke slowly, clearly. She told the story. Her story. The girl under the rubble. The dog who wouldn't leave her. The woman who carried her out. The commander who told them to forget. She didn't name names, but she named the feeling, the silence, the fear, the years of wondering who else knew. Eli stood nearby, not interrupting. When Lara finished, she uploaded the video. No hashtags, no names, just a simple title. He never forgot. They didn't expect it to go far, but it did. Within hours, it was shared. Within a day, someone reached out. A woman from a military watchdog group. Then a man who said he had been in the same town, same mission, but told never to speak. People were coming forward, because they had all kept quiet for too long. That night, the knock on the cabin door came just after midnight. Eli opened it without fear. Owen Roth stood there, soaked from rain, a folder in his hand. He looked tired, but alive. I brought something, he said. Inside the folder, photos, signatures, transfer orders, all linked to Breck, and a list of names. Men who had paid to bury the story. It wasn't just about the girl. It was about what the mission had covered up. They had everything now. The truth, the documents, the eyes of the world. But Finn? He was fading. Eli knew it. So did he. The next morning he didn't get up. He tried, but his body had reached its edge. She laid beside him on the floor, her forehead pressed gently to his. Lara sat on the other side, her hand on his back. You saved me, she whispered. I don't know if I ever said that. Eli didn't cry, but her voice cracked. He knew, and when he took his final breath, he was not alone. He left surrounded by love, and that was more than most got. Finn was buried just before sunrise. Not with a flag, not with ceremony, just beneath a wide tree behind the cabin, wrapped in Eli's old medic jacket, and a towel Lara had folded without speaking. Eli dug the grave herself. Her palms blistered by the time the shovel hit soft rock. She didn't stop. Lara stood nearby the whole time, holding a photo of Finn with the girl, young Lara, taken just after the rescue. Owen Roth carved the cross by hand. Quiet, focused. No one said goodbye. They just stayed. Still. Together. And when Eli placed the last scoop of dirt over him, she whispered, You did everything right. Then she stood and walked back into the house with nothing left in her hands. The video Lara posted had reached over 100,000 views in 2 days. Then 1 million by the end of the week. Journalists began to call. Military officials began to deny. But the people watching, they knew. Because truth feels different than stories. And Finn's story, Eli's story, was real. Photos began to appear in inboxes. Letters from former soldiers. Medical files with blacked-out names. Even an audio clip from a radio transmission long thought lost. A medic calling for extraction. A dog refusing to leave. A child breathing under rubble. And through all of it, Eli never once asked for attention. She didn't give interviews. She didn't stand on a stage. She sat at the same kitchen table every day, sorting through the pieces of a truth the world was finally willing to hear. Lara had started painting again. Small things at first, brush strokes that didn't need to be perfect. She smiled more now, slept longer, talked to Eli like someone who finally believed she deserved to. And Owen? He came by every other day. Not to lead, not to explain, just to help. Sometimes he brought wood. Sometimes he sat in silence. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It had changed. One morning, a box arrived on the porch. No return address. Eli opened it carefully. Inside, a small bronze plaque. Etched on it were only 5 words. He never left the girl. And beneath it, a single line of coordinates. They marked the place Finn had first barked. Where he had found her. Where her life had begun again. Eli closed the box gently and set it on the mantel above the fireplace. Then she picked up the phone. The memorial was simple. A tree. A photo. A wooden bench. Eli didn't speak. But Lara did. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke about memory. About how safety doesn't always come in uniforms. About how sometimes the person who saves you doesn't speak your language or stand on 2 feet. She said Finn had given her back her voice. That Eli had taught her how to use it. And when she was finished, no one clapped. But no one looked away. 3 months later, a bill passed quietly. Nothing major. Just new rules about animal retirement from service. Mandatory evaluations. Full documentation. Safe homes. And something more important. Acknowledgement. A wall was built in a small room at the National Archives. Not in the front. Not lit by spotlights. But real. On that wall, Finn's name was engraved. And beside it, a single sentence. Not just a dog. A witness. Back at the cabin, life moved forward. The porch still creaked. The wind still whispered through the trees. But Eli wasn't waiting anymore. One evening, Lara asked her, "Do you ever feel like he's still here?" Eli looked out the window toward the tree in the yard. "I don't feel like he's gone." And in the quiet that followed, they both smiled. Because the truth was simple. They mocked her for keeping the old war dog. But when the world tried to erase what really happened, he remembered. And because of that, so did everyone else. Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.